There's something about the steady hum of a mole in the evening that feels like a warm, familiar song. For as long as I've lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the Century Mole has been my little sanctuary, a place where the world seemed to pause just long enough for me to breathe, collect myself, and put the pieces of my day back together. Whenever life felt a bit too tangled, or work had wrung every drop of energy from me, I'd find myself here, wandering between the glowing store windows, letting the chatter of strangers and the scent of fresh pretzels work their quiet magic. That particular Thursday, the mole felt almost like a second home. I'd wrapped up a long day at the publishing house, a parade of meetings, emails, and deadlines, and I was craving a sense of control, a tiny victory that belonged only to me. My mission was simple: find a birthday gift for my mother, something that would light up her face with that unmistakable smile, the one that reminded me of childhood birthdays and backyard picnics, of moments when the world was simple and safe. I'd been racking my brain all week, scrolling through online shops late at night, but nothing seemed quite right. Tonight, I was determined to find it. The mall was already buzzing by the time I arrived, its corridors bright with neon and echoes of laughter. I paused for a moment just inside the entrance, letting the cool air wash over me. Somewhere nearby, a child squealed with delight, and I smiled to myself. I always liked to imagine the stories of the people who passed me, what they were celebrating, what they were escaping, who they loved and who had let them down. Sometimes, when my own life felt too heavy, these quiet observations were enough to lift me, even for a moment. I made my way to the little cafe tucked between a shoe store and a vintage record shop, the kind of place that always smelled like vanilla and roasted beans. It was my ritual: order a medium almond latte, sprinkle on a little cinnamon, and find the seat by the glass wall where I could watch the world go by. The barista, a college kid named Brooke, greeted me with a nod. We didn't know each other well, but we shared a kind of silent camaraderie built on routine. She slid the steaming cup across the counter, and I thanked her, grateful for the small kindnesses that made the world feel a little less chaotic. As I settled in, I wrapped my hands around the cup, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. The first sip was always the best, smooth, rich, and just a touch sweet, the foam soft against my lip. For a few precious minutes, I allowed myself to simply be. Through the glass, I watched a group of teenagers jostling each other, their laughter echoing through the atrium. I saw a young mom wrangling two toddlers, their tiny sneakers lighting up with every stomp. An older couple walked arm in arm, their steps slow but perfectly in sync. In their world, I was invisible, and I liked it that way. Sometimes, being an observer felt safer than being seen. My phone vibrated in my bag, another work email, no doubt. I ignored it. Tonight, I wanted to be present, to allow myself the luxury of slowness, of breathing in the present without worrying about the next deadline or the mounting list of things I hadn't yet done. The mall offered that rare kind of anonymity. Here, no one expected anything from me. I could disappear into the current of people and emerge, somehow, a little lighter. After finishing my latte, I wandered from store to store, carefully considering each possibility for Mom's gift. Jewelry felt too impersonal. She wasn't much for flashy things. Books, perhaps. But I'd already given her so many, and I wanted something that would truly surprise her. A beautiful scarf caught my eye, silk, hand-painted, swirling with the colors of a Boston fall. It was perfect. The kind of thing she'd never buy for herself but would wear on special days, just to feel a little more alive. I bought it, and the sales clerk wrapped it in crisp white tissue, tying it with a sky-blue ribbon that made me strangely nostalgic for childhood birthdays. I let myself linger, savoring the feeling of a small mission accomplished. With the gift bag swinging gently from my hand, I drifted toward the exit, my mind already imagining Mum's reaction. The air outside the mall was warm, the last breath of late summer, and the asphalt in the parking lot still radiated heat from the day. I caught myself humming a tune I'd heard on the radio earlier, a song from when I was 16, and thought the world would always be as simple as it felt in that moment. If I had known what was waiting for me just around the corner, maybe I would have stayed in the mall a little longer. Maybe I would have ordered a second latte, wandered through one more store, let myself believe for just a few more minutes that my world was exactly as it should be. But life never waits for us to be ready, does it? It always moves, relentless and unpredictable, sweeping us up in its current whether we're prepared or not. Still, as I walked toward my car, gift bag swinging, heart lighter than it had been in weeks, I couldn't help but feel that, just for tonight, everything was right. I belonged, if only to myself. And that felt like enough. Walking through the mall's double doors and into the Duskla parking lot, I felt lighter than I had in months. The warm breeze tangled my hair as I stepped onto the fading white lines, the night settling in with that quiet peace you only find at the end of a long, good day. I didn't know it yet, but this fleeting moment of contentment was about to fracture in the most unexpected way. The parking lot at Century Mall wasn't ever really empty, but that evening it seemed especially calm, just a handful of cars scattered like chess pieces, their headlights flickering on as the sky deepened from lavender to navy. I walked, almost dancing, my mother's gift in hand, enjoying the simplicity of my own little world. I remember thinking, hold on to this. Remember how happiness sometimes comes in the tiniest shapes, like a perfect latte or a hand-painted scarf. I turned a corner, the familiar rhythm of the mall fading behind me. And that's when I saw it. Parked 3 rows over, almost hidden behind a delivery van, was a car I'd recognize anywhere, a silver Toyota Camry with a dented rear bumper and a faded Red Sox sticker clinging to the window. My breath caught. Jake's car. My husband's car. There was no mistaking it. For a split second, I stood perfectly still, as if my feet had melted into the asphalt. The world seemed to tilt, the air thick with confusion. Why would Jake's car be here? He'd called at lunchtime, apologizing that he'd be late, at back-to-back meetings. Liv, I'm sorry. Don't wait up for me. His office was downtown, a good 30 minutes from here, and he was never one for shopping or aimless wandering. He hated malls, in fact. Always complained about the crowds and the parking. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. Maybe he had loaned his car to a friend, or maybe I was seeing things. But that car, with its lopsided license plate and familiar wear, was as recognizable to me as my own reflection. I could feel my pulse rising, the earlier calm now replaced by a rush of something jagged and cold. My grip tightened on the gift bag, the sharp edge biting into my palm. I took a slow breath, but my lungs refused to fill all the way. All at once, my mind began flipping through explanations, desperately searching for one that made sense. Maybe Jake had stopped by to pick up something for me. Maybe he was planning a surprise, a sweet gesture, something to make up for all those late nights at work. But the longer I stood there, staring at that car, the less likely it felt. The ordinary details of my day seemed suddenly far away, blurred by the pounding of my heart. The mall's lights cast long shadows across the parking lot, and I felt like I was standing at the edge of 2 different worlds, the life I'd known just minutes before, and the uncertain, trembling moment that was opening in front of me. I glanced around, half expecting to see Jake striding toward me with that easy, crooked smile. But there was only silence, punctuated by the distant clang of a shopping cart and the soft chirp of someone unlocking their car. Should I just walk away? Should I leave, go home, and pretend I hadn't seen anything? That would be easier. I wanted so badly to hold onto the fragile peace I'd felt moments earlier. But a stubborn spark inside me, a part of me that had never let go of hard truths, refused to move. I needed to know. Even if it hurt. My feet moved on their own, slow and deliberate, the gift bag swinging at my side. I didn't rush. The air seemed heavier with every step, thick with the scent of cooling asphalt and the remnants of summer heat. I walked past rows of cars, each one suddenly looming and strange. My mind replayed every conversation I'd had with Jake in the past week, searching for any hint, any warning I'd missed. Nothing. Just the steady drumbeat of normal life. Or so I'd thought. As I got closer, my hands began to shake. I could see now that the Camry's windows were slightly fogged, the interior shadowed but not empty. My heart was a wild thing, battering against my ribs. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to run, to keep my world intact for just a little longer. But I kept moving, unwilling to let my fear be stronger than my need for the truth. I ducked behind a large black SUV, my breath coming faster. I could see clearly now. Jake was in the driver's seat, his head bowed as if reading something in his lap. A woman sat in the passenger seat, her face mostly turned away. She was laughing, a light, airy sound that carried across the stillness of the lot. My stomach dropped, a cold wave crashing through me. This was not a work meeting. This was not an errand. The woman touched Jake's arm. I watched, frozen, as he looked up and smiled, reaching across to brush a strand of hair from her face. The gesture was so intimate, so familiar, that it made my skin prickle. Then, almost casually, he leaned over and kissed her. It was a quick, practiced kiss, one that spoke of history, not hesitation. My vision blurred, a hot rush of disbelief burning behind my eyes. I wanted to yell, to scream, to make the world stop spinning. But instead, I crouched lower behind the SUV, clutching the gift bag like a shield. I could hear my own pulse louder than the laughter drifting from the Camry. Nothing in my life would ever be the same again. For a moment, I stayed there, numb, every thought in my head scattering like leaves in the wind. I fumbled for my phone, fingers trembling so badly I nearly dropped it. I took a photo, then another and another, each shutter click ringing out in the night, each one another tiny wound, proof that I hadn't imagined any of this. I wanted evidence, not a confrontation. I needed the truth to be something solid I could hold when the hurt tried to rewrite the memory. By the time I stood up, Jake and the woman were climbing out of the car, their voices soft and intertwined, heading toward the far exit of the mall. They were completely unaware of the world collapsing just a few cars away. I didn't follow. I stood, rooted to the spot, my mother's birthday gift now absurdly heavy in my hand. The parking lot, with its scattered lights and echoing footsteps, felt suddenly huge and empty, a strange, lonely landscape where nothing was as I believed. And that's when I realized my life was about to split into a before and an after. And I had no idea what the after it would look like. I don't know how long I stood there, half hidden between parked cars, the gift bag's handles cutting deeper into my palm with every passing second. Everything that had felt steady in my life, my marriage, my routines, the future I'd quietly sketched in my mind, suddenly tilted, teetering on the edge of this one impossible scene. I remember thinking, oddly, about the ridiculousness of it all, how ordinary heartbreak can look in the fluorescent glow of a mall parking lot. Not a dramatic movie scene, just a quiet, ugly rupture that happens between discount signs and shopping carts. I tried to take a breath, but my chest felt too tight, like every muscle had seized up. Somewhere in the distance, a teenager revved his car and sped past, music blaring, oblivious to the silent crisis unfolding just a few feet away. The mall's evening crowd was thinning out, people drifting to their cars, their arms full of bags, their minds on dinner and TV and anything but betrayal. For a split second, I wondered if I should confront them, march right up to Jake and his mystery woman, demand answers, make a scene that would at least feel worthy of the pain searing through me. But that wasn't me. I'd never been the type to explode, to shout or throw things. I was the quiet one, the fixer, the girl who handled things by folding her feelings into neat corners and moving forward. Besides, I didn't want witnesses to my unraveling, not here, not now. Instead, I watched as Jake and the woman strolled toward the far exit of the mall, their bodies close, her hand grazing the small of his back. That single gesture hurt more than the kiss. It was so easy, so practiced, that I knew this wasn't the first time. That was the real knife twist, not just the betrayal, but the realization of how long I must have been living in the shadows of their secret. I took another shaky photo and slipped my phone into my purse. The cool metal felt reassuring, like armor against the chaos of the moment. I wasn't ready for a confrontation, but I needed the truth to be more than a feeling, more than just the paranoid suspicion I could have explained away with enough denial and time. The evidence in my phone felt cold and sharp, impossible to ignore, impossible to unsee. I finally moved, every step slow and mechanical, my brain still fogged and sluggish. By the time I reached my own car, I could barely remember unlocking the doors, sliding into the driver's seat, and setting the gift bag on the passenger side. I sat there, engine off, listening to my own heartbeat, waiting for the tears to come. They didn't. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror, my eyes wide, my face pale in the dashboard lights, a version of myself I didn't quite recognize. What now? That was the question echoing louder than anything else. What do you do when the story you thought you were living turns out to be a lie? For a moment, I considered calling someone, my sister in New York, my best friend Leah back in Chicago, even my mother. But I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to hear my own voice break, wasn't ready for sympathy or anger or advice. I needed time to think, to grieve in private, to rebuild my own understanding of the world. I started the engine and drove home through quiet, tree-lined streets. The city was winding down, porch lights flicking on, people gathering for their ordinary, unbroken evenings. I envied them. I envied anyone who hadn't just lost the foundation of their life in the span of a few silent minutes. My house felt different when I arrived, as if it already knew what I had discovered. I left the gift bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and wandered through the rooms like a ghost. Jake wouldn't be home for hours. He'd made sure to say as much. I found myself straightening the living room, watering the plant by the window, running my finger over the dustless surface of the kitchen table. Anything to keep from thinking. But thoughts are stubborn things. They pressed in from every side. How long had this been going on? Was I just a prop in Jake's carefully managed life? Did he ever intend to tell me, or was he content to let me play the loyal wife while he spun a separate world somewhere else? As the hours slipped by, the initial shock gave way to a colder, more focused energy. I started looking for clues, not just the obvious, like the text messages I'd already seen, but the patterns in our life. The late nights that had grown more frequent, the sudden new cologne, the vague answers about work events I hadn't been invited to. The story of our marriage began to unravel, thread by thread, as I sifted through each memory with new, suspicious eyes. I checked the pockets of Jake's jackets, finding receipts for dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of, a boutique shopping bag tucked at the back of his closet, a matchbook from a hotel bar on the other side of town. I took photos, made notes, assembled a quiet archive of betrayal. If I couldn't have honesty, I would have proof. It was the only thing I could control. Later, I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through our old photos on my phone. I found one from our first trip to Cape Cod, the two of us. Sunburned and smiling, arms wrapped around each other on the boardwalk. We looked so young, so sure of each other, that I had to close my eyes for a moment to keep from crying. I wondered what Jake would say if he could see me now, piecing together the mosaic of his deception with the same care I'd once reserved for planning our future. By midnight, exhaustion finally won. I crawled into bed, fully dressed, my phone pressed to my chest. Jake still wasn't home. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the ticking of the old clock in the hallway, and made myself a promise I would not be broken by this. I would gather every fact, every lie, every moment that didn't add up, and when the time was right, I would decide how this story ended. Somewhere, deep inside, I felt a strange calm settle over me. If Jake thought he could keep living two lives, if he thought I would stay blind forever, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The next morning felt strangely normal. The sun poured through the blinds in slanted gold, dust motes swirling above the comforter, the world outside waking up like nothing had changed. I lay still, letting the quiet settle over me, replaying everything from the night before, the parking lot, the kiss, the evidence tucked safely away in my phone. I felt hollowed out, but there was a new steadiness beneath the ache, a resolve that surprised me. I wasn't going to fall apart. Not yet. Jake's side of the bed was empty, but his scent lingered, soap, aftershave, a trace of the cologne he'd only started wearing in the last month. I wondered who had picked it out for him. There was a time I would have asked, eager for any small detail of his life, but now the question withered on my tongue. I moved through the house like a shadow, quiet and careful. The gift bag from Mom was still by the door, its sky blue ribbon a jarring reminder of the day before, of my old life. I carried it to the kitchen, set it on the table, and made myself coffee. Every step felt deliberate, controlled. I measured out the grounds, poured the water, watched the steam curl upward, and reminded myself, one thing at a time. Jake appeared just as I was pouring my second cup. He smiled, bright, practiced, utterly ordinary. "Morning, Liv," he said, voice light. "You're up early." I returned the smile, matching his calm. "I couldn't sleep," I said, keeping my tone even, casual. Inside, I was ice. I watched him move around the kitchen, opening the fridge, peering inside, humming some half-remembered tune. I wondered if he could sense the difference, if my silence tasted sharper than before. We made small talk, the kind married couples perfect after years of practice. He complained about traffic on I-90, about the broken printer at his office, about how the coffee shop downstairs had switched to oat milk and ruined his regular latte. I nodded, asked the right questions, even laughed at the right moments. But every word he spoke felt rehearsed, a script I knew by heart but suddenly heard differently. When he left for work, I watched him from the window. He walked to his car, checked his phone, and drove away without a backward glance. The house was silent again. I breathed out, let the mask fall, and slumped against the counter. The ache was there, raw and insistent, but now there was a current of something else. Anger, maybe, or just clarity. Jake didn't suspect a thing. My silence was working. I went about my day as if nothing had changed. At work, I answered emails, reviewed manuscripts, sat through meetings where people debated commas and character arcs with more passion than most marriages had left. No one noticed anything different. I smiled, contributed ideas, even volunteered for an extra project, just to keep myself busy. But every so often, my mind drifted back to the evidence I was collecting, the truth I held like a secret blade. When I got home that night, Jake was already on the couch, feet up, TV on, as if nothing in the world could touch him. He greeted me with another easy grin, asked about my day, told me he'd picked up takeout from my favorite Thai place. The normalcy was almost dizzying. I went along with it, setting the table, pouring us each a glass of wine. We ate in silence for a while, the clink of forks and glasses the only sounds between us. He talked about work again, more meetings, a deadline pushed back, a new hire he was mentoring. I listened, storing away every detail, every hesitation. When he looked down at his plate for a beat too long or hesitated before answering a question, I made a mental note. My whole life had become a game of observation, a slow accumulation of facts and lies. I wondered how long I could keep this up before something in me snapped. After dinner, Jake suggested we watch a movie. I agreed, letting him choose some action flick he knew I didn't care for. I sat beside him on the couch, feet curled beneath me, pretending to be absorbed in the explosions and car chases. In reality, I was thinking about the folder of evidence hidden on my phone, the receipts tucked in my purse, the growing list of late nights and unexplained absences. That night, after Jake fell asleep, I tiptoed into the bathroom and closed the door. I opened my phone, scrolled through the photos, reread the texts I'd saved, reviewed the screenshots of credit card transactions and odd receipts. Each new piece felt like another stone added to the weight I carried, but it also gave me strength. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't blind. I was preparing for the day I'd let the truth out, and when I did, I wanted to be ready for every denial, every excuse. Lying awake in the darkness, I thought about what came next. I didn't want a screaming match in a parking lot. I didn't want to be the woman sobbing in public, tearing her heart out for an audience of strangers. I wanted to be something else, someone who held her head high, who made choices, who walked away with dignity and the evidence to prove she hadn't imagined any of it. I made a plan. I'd wait. I'd keep collecting facts. I'd let Jake think he was safe, let him wrap himself tighter in his web. When the time was right, I would choose the moment, the place, the audience. He wouldn't see it coming. For the first time since that night in the parking lot, I slept soundly. My silence wasn't a prison anymore, it was armor. And every day, I wore it a little better. The days that followed fell into an uneasy rhythm, normal on the surface, but everything beneath it sharp and electric. I became hyper-aware of details, the way Jake's voice softened when he texted, how he started showering right when he got home, the faint trace of perfume on his shirts that I knew wasn't mine. Each new inconsistency was like a thread, and I was determined to pull every last one until the whole tapestry of lies unraveled. I started small, careful not to tip my hand. In the early morning, while Jake was in the shower, I went through the pockets of his jackets, quietly searching for anything that didn't fit our story. Receipts from places we'd never been together. Small slips of paper, bar tabs, a boutique purchase, a folded napkin with a phone number written in quick, looping handwriting. My fingers trembled, but I moved slowly, putting everything back exactly as I'd found it. At work, I found myself distracted, my mind replaying the scene in the parking lot on an endless loop. I'd close my eyes and see them together, his hand on her arm, that soft, private laugh. Sometimes, rage would threaten to break through, hot and wild, but I'd tamp it down and channel it into a new focus. I started paying attention to everything Jake said and did, writing notes to myself on my phone. Late again, another urgent project, a random calls in the hallway. Whenever Jake left his phone unattended, I'd glance at his notifications. I never unlocked it. I wasn't ready to cross that line, but I memorized the names that kept appearing. M. Avsara. Work. A. Unknown. I wasn't even sure what I hoped to find. Sometimes, all I wanted was confirmation that I wasn't crazy. The collection of small, suspicious details grew every day, until I had enough to fill a folder, both digital and in my mind. I started photographing everything. The receipts. The new cologne bottle hidden behind his deodorant. Even his car's mileage, noting how it ticked up on days he swore he was working from home. When he came home late, I'd greet him with a practiced smile and carefully file away every word he said, every nervous glance, every casual touch that felt just a little too forced. Some nights, Jake would kiss my cheek and hold me close, and I'd wonder if he could feel how distant I'd become. Did he sense the storm building beneath my calm exterior? I doubted it. He seemed almost happier these days, lighter, more talkative, quick to suggest a weekend getaway or a night out with friends. I played along, pretending nothing was wrong, my performance flawless. I told myself I needed more time. I wasn't ready to let him know I'd seen everything. Outside our home, life looked unchanged. Our neighbors waved as I pulled into the driveway. Friends texted to set up brunches, checking in to see how I was doing. I lied to all of them, as easily as I'd been lied to. The truth was a secret I carried everywhere, heavy, but strangely empowering. I was no longer the woman who needed to be protected from the truth. I was the one holding all the cards, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal my hand. Each night, I lay awake beside Jake, listening to the steady rise and fall of his breathing. I wondered how many times he'd come home from her arms straight into mine. The thought burned, but I didn't let it destroy me. Instead, I turned it into fuel. I would not let this break me. I would not let him take anything else from me, not my self-respect, not my dignity, not my future. I started thinking about what came next. I pictured the confrontation, the moment Jake's mask would crack. I imagined myself standing tall, calm and unshakable, armed with every fact and every proof. No yelling, no crying, just the truth, spoken clearly, in front of the people who mattered most. The idea became a kind of comfort, a beacon I could move toward whenever the pain threatened to swallow me. By the end of the week, my evidence was organized and thorough. I had photographs, screenshots, receipts, timelines, even a list of calls and texts that didn't add up. I replayed every interaction, looking for the perfect opportunity. When should I tell him? Should I wait until we were alone, or would it be better to have an audience? Family, friends, the people he'd fooled for so long? One afternoon, while sorting laundry, I found a lipstick-stained napkin tucked inside the pocket of Jake's coat. I stared at it for a long time, my fingers trembling, then folded it neatly and added it to my collection. I was methodical, almost cold, as if the evidence belonged to someone else, some other couple, in another city. But it was ours. It was me. In the moments when doubt crept in, when I wondered if I was being paranoid or vindictive, I'd scroll through the folder on my phone and remind myself, this is real. This is happening. I deserve to know the truth, and he deserves to answer for it. One evening, Jake came home with flowers, lilies, my favorite. He handed them to me with a smile, kissed my forehead, and told me he loved me. I looked him in the eye, steady and unblinking, and thanked him. The lie tasted bitter, but it made my resolve even sharper. If Jake thought he could hide behind small gestures and practiced smiles, he was wrong. I was ready now. I was prepared for whatever came next. My silence had become my greatest weapon, and I would use it until the very last moment. The storm was gathering. And this time, I would be the one to choose where it broke. As the weekend approached, the weight of what I knew pressed heavier on my chest, but I forced myself to move through every day as if nothing were wrong. I did my hair, went to work, kept my lunch dates, and even texted my mom about her upcoming birthday. No one suspected a thing. It was strange how easy it became to split myself in two: Olivia the wife, steady and calm, and Olivia the detective, quietly collecting truths no one else saw. By Sunday morning, I'd settled into my role so completely it almost frightened me. Jake lounged on the porch, coffee in hand, scrolling his phone with a contented half-smile. He looked up as I joined him, stretching out an arm to pull me close. His touch was gentle, familiar. If someone had snapped a photo of us just then, would have looked like the perfect couple, a snapshot of suburban peace. But inside, I was making a list. I counted the days, the lies, the details that had changed since that evening at the mall. Jake's routines had become so predictable. Monday, late at work. Wednesday, a team dinner that never included spouses. Friday, always a last-minute errand before coming home. I didn't even need to check his phone anymore to know when he'd see her. The knowledge didn't hurt less with repetition, but it sharpened my purpose. If I wanted the truth to matter, I would have to reveal it on my own terms. I thought about confrontation, what it would mean, how it would feel. I didn't want it to be explosive, messy, or driven by rage. I wanted it to be undeniable. And as the idea took root, it started to grow, not just a confrontation, but a reckoning, witnessed by those who mattered to both of us. I waited, patient as the tide, until the perfect opportunity presented itself. Jake's parents were coming into town for a family dinner, a tradition we'd started years ago, when marriage was still new and every gathering felt like a promise for the future. This time, I offered to host. Jake was pleased, maybe even relieved. Lately, he'd been distant from his family, always busy or distracted. He seemed grateful for my effort, and he threw himself into preparations, humming as he set the table, picking out wine, arranging flowers on the counter. It was almost enough to fool me, too. But I was ready. I had copied all the photos from my phone to my laptop, printed out the most damning receipts, and tucked everything into a neat envelope labeled only with his name. I set it aside, my hands trembling just once, then stilled by the certainty that I was doing the right thing. I even bought a small external speaker, the kind you could connect to your phone, and charged it up. I wasn't sure yet how I'd use it, only that I wanted to have options. I was thinking not just about Jake, but about his parents, about the truth they deserved, about the respect I owed myself. The night of the dinner, the house glowed with warmth and anticipation. I made Jake's favorite dish, lemon herb chicken, roasted just right, with mashed potatoes and green beans. His mother, a sharp-eyed woman named Carol, brought a pie from a bakery in the city. His father, Ed, carried a bottle of wine and stories about his fishing buddies. We all laughed in the kitchen, setting out plates, pouring drinks, trading memories. For a few hours, the old comfort returned, fragile but real. Jake was at his best, telling jokes, filling silences, asking his mother about her volunteer work. No one would have guessed how much distance he put between us, or how much I knew. He squeezed my hand under the table, a silent thank you for making the evening so pleasant. I squeezed back, letting him believe it was real. After dinner, I stood and tapped my glass, drawing everyone's attention. Jake smiled, assuming I wanted to make a toast. Instead, I reached for my laptop and turned it toward the table. I thought it might be nice to share some memories, I said, voice steady. We don't always get to do this together. Carol beamed, Ed nodded, and Jake relaxed in his chair. I started with safe, happy photos, our first trip to Martha's Vineyard, birthday parties, cookouts, the three of us grinning at the beach. Everyone smiled, recalling the stories behind each image. I could feel the tension in my own body as I clicked through the album, each slide taking me closer to what I needed to show. Then, in a single breath, everything changed. The next image appeared, Jake's car in the mall parking lot, unmistakable, parked beside a woman whose hand rested on his shoulder. The photo was crisp, unmistakable. Before anyone could react, I clicked again. Another photo, Jake kissing her, the two of them laughing as if the world belonged only to them. A stunned silence fell over the room. Jake stared, mouth open, words failing him for the first time in years. Carol's hand flew to her mouth, her wine glass trembling. Ed's eyes darkened with disappointment. No one spoke, the only sound the soft whir of my laptop's fan. I stood tall, my hands steady at last. I wanted you to know, I said quietly. This is what's been happening while I thought we were building a life together. I've collected the evidence, the receipts, the messages. I thought you all deserved the truth. Jake tried to speak, stammering half excuses, but I held up a hand. Don't, I said. Tonight, I choose myself. I'm done living in a world built on lies. Carol reached for me, her face full of tears. Olivia, I shook my head gently. Thank you. But I have to do this on my own. I placed the envelope in front of Jake, every piece of proof neatly organized. The truth lay between us, heavy, irreversible. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the weight begin to lift from my chest. I wasn't afraid anymore. For a moment after I spoke, no one moved. Jake's parents sat frozen in their chairs, eyes wide, mouths slack. Even the background hum of the refrigerator seemed to fall silent. Jake looked between the laptop screen, the envelope of evidence, and my face as if searching for an explanation that would make all of it go away. But there was no explanation left that I'd believe. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His hands fumbled with the envelope, pulling out receipts and photos with shaking fingers. I could see the dawning horror in his eyes as he realized just how much I'd seen, how much I'd understood, how thoroughly I dismantled the story he'd been selling me for months. The woman in the photos, her laughing eyes, her easy touch, the stolen moments that had felt so ordinary to them, was now exposed, their secret life dragged into the harsh light of my kitchen. Carol was the first to speak. Her voice was thin, broken. Jake, is this true? Jake tried to compose himself, but he was already unraveling. Mom, it's not what it looks like. Olivia, I can explain. It's not. I met his gaze, steady and unblinking. Don't. Please don't insult any of us by pretending this is a misunderstanding. I know what I saw. And now everyone else does too. I let the words settle, hard but necessary. Ed shook his head, anger flickering behind the disappointment on his face. Jake, how could you? How could you do this to her? To all of us? Jake's mouth worked, but he couldn't find an answer. The room was so tense I felt I could hear every shallow breath, every ticking second. A strange calm settled over me, as if I were floating above the scene, both the director and the main character in a play I'd rehearsed 100 times in my head. I'm not here to fight, I said quietly. I just want you to know that this, I gestured at the table, the photos, the truth, isn't my secret to keep anymore. I refuse to carry your lies, Jake. I deserve better than this. I saw something change in Carol's eyes. Sympathy, yes, but also respect. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry, Olivia. I had no idea. None at all. It's not your fault, I said, and for the first time, I really meant it. I'd spent so much time wondering if I'd missed something, if I'd failed somehow, if there was something I could have done differently. But the truth was as simple as it was cruel. Jake had made his choices, and I was done paying the price for them. Jake put his head in his hands. I never meant to hurt you, he whispered, voice cracking. I was lost. I messed up. Please, can't we talk about this? Just us? I shook my head. I don't want to talk. I want action. I want honesty. And I want out. The next hour was a blur of voices, Carol's quiet apologies, Ed's harsh words for his son, Jake's desperate attempts to explain. I stayed calm, answering questions when I needed to, letting my anger dissolve into a cold, sharp resolve. Every time Jake tried to make it about us, about a working through this, I stopped him with a look. There was nothing left to work through. My marriage, once the bedrock of my life, was already gone. Eventually, Carol and Ed stood, hugging me tight, promising support and understanding. Your family, Olivia. No matter what happens, Carol whispered. Her words warmed me more than I expected. I realized, with a kind of bittersweet relief, that I wasn't leaving with nothing. I was leaving with the knowledge that I'd held my ground, that I'd chosen the truth over comfort. Jake and I were alone at last, the mess of evidence between us. He tried one last time, voice thick with panic. Olivia, please. I can change. I'll do anything. Don't throw us away. Don't throw me away. I stood, shoulders back, feeling taller than I had in years. You made that choice for both of us, Jake. You just didn't expect me to see it. Or to do anything about it. He looked at me, tears welling in his eyes, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. But I pushed the feeling aside. I'd spent enough time mourning what we'd lost. Now, I needed to protect what I had left, myself, my future, my dignity. I walked to the front closet, pulled out my overnight bag, and slipped on my coat. My hands didn't shake this time. I felt clear and strong, every step sure and deliberate. As I reached the door, Jake's voice followed me, pleading, broken. Olivia, please don't go. Please. I paused, hand on the doorknob, and looked back at him one last time. Goodbye, Jake. The night air was cold but bracing as I stepped outside. I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing in the crispness, letting the ache in my chest settle into something like peace. The world felt different, sharper, but for the first time in a long while, it belonged to me again. I texted my sister, Leah, letting her know I was coming. Her reply came in a rush. Doors always open. I've got wine and a listening ear. Love you. I smiled, feeling the first flicker of hope in the darkness. I didn't know exactly what would come next, how I would rebuild, how long it would take to trust again. But I knew this much. I had walked through the fire, carrying my truth like a torch, and I had survived. Maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now.